Maria Santos hadn't slept in a real bed for 8 months. The cardboard she called home sat wedged between a dumpster and the back wall of an old apartment building on 7th Street, where the city's forgotten came to disappear. Her clothes were layers of donated fabric that no longer matched. Her hands were calloused and cracked from the cold, and her eyes carried the weight of 1,000 disappointments. But on that frigid Tuesday evening in late November, as the sun bled orange across the skyline, Maria's eyes held something else entirely, a mother's instinct that refused to die. She was sorting through the day's findings when she heard it. A scream, high-pitched, terrified, unmistakably the cry of a child. Maria's head snapped up. Smoke, thick and acrid, poured from a second-floor window of the building she'd been living behind for months. Flames licked at the window frame, hungry and growing, and through the chaos she heard it again. That scream, weaker now, desperate. People gathered on the street, phones out, pointing, shouting. Someone yelled that the fire department was on the way, but Maria knew what on the way meant in this neighborhood. It meant minutes the child didn't have. She looked down at her trembling hands at the life she'd been reduced to, and for a moment she felt the crushing weight of her own insignificance. Who was she to be anyone's hero? But that scream, it sounded like her own daughter's voice, the one she'd lost to the system 3 years ago when the eviction notice came. That scream was every nightmare she'd lived through, and somehow, impossibly, it was also her chance to mean something again. If this story is touching your heart, please hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Pulse for more stories that remind us of the power of compassion. Your support means everything. Maria ran. Her worn sneakers slapped against the pavement as she pushed through the growing crowd. Someone grabbed her arm. "Lady, you can't go in there." But she wrenched free. The front door was locked, but the side entrance had a broken latch she'd discovered weeks ago during a cold night, when she'd sought shelter in the stairwell. The heat hit her like a physical wall. Smoke filled the hallway, turning everything into a hellish gray fog that burned her lungs with every breath. She pulled her scarf over her mouth, dropped to her knees where the air was clearer, and crawled toward the stairs. The child's crying was louder now, coming from above. 2nd floor, apartment 2C. She knew because she'd watched a young mother with a little boy come and go from that unit countless times. Always alone, always looking exhausted. The stairs felt like climbing a mountain. Each step was agony, the heat intensifying, the smoke thickening. Maria's eyes streamed tears, her lungs screamed for clean air, but she kept moving. She thought about her daughter, about the bedtime stories she used to read, about every person who'd walked past her on the street without seeing her. And she thought about this child who needed someone, anyone, to see them. Apartment 2C's door was hot to the touch. Maria twisted the knob and burst inside. The living room was a nightmare of flames and collapsing furniture, but she could hear him, crying from the bedroom, trapped behind a door jammed shut by debris. Using her body weight, Maria slammed against it once, twice, 3 times until it gave way. Inside, huddled beneath a window that wouldn't open, was a boy no older than 5, his face streaked with tears and soot, his small body trembling. "I've got you, baby," Maria whispered, though her voice came out as a ragged cough. She wrapped him in her coat, the last thing of any value she owned, and lifted him into her arms. The journey back was a blur of pain and determination, the stairs collapsing behind them, the flames reaching like demons, the smoke trying to steal their last breaths. But Maria refused to give up. When they burst through the side entrance into the cold night air, the crowd erupted. Paramedics rushed forward, pulling the child from her arms, laying Maria on the ground as her body finally surrendered to exhaustion. The last thing she saw before her vision faded was the boy's mother arriving in a panic and falling to her knees beside her son, sobbing with relief. Maria woke in a hospital room 2 days later, her throat raw, her body aching but alive. A nurse told her she'd been treated for smoke inhalation and minor burns, that someone had paid for everything. Before Maria could ask who, the door opened, and a man in an expensive suit walked in, tall, silver-haired, with eyes that held the same haunted look she saw in her own mirror. "Miss Santos," he said, his voice breaking. "My name is Robert Chen. That boy you saved? That's my grandson." The story spilled out in fragments. Robert was a CEO worth millions, but he'd been estranged from his daughter, the boy's mother, for years after his wife's death. Pride and pain had kept them apart, even as she struggled as a single mother, refusing his money, trying to prove she could make it alone. The fire had been electrical, random, devastating, and if not for Maria's courage, his grandson would have died. The firefighter said you were homeless, Robert continued, tears streaming down his face. They said you risked everything when you had nothing. Miss Santos, you're my hero. You're my daughter's hero. You're my grandson's hero. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. I've spent the last 2 days searching for you because I needed to find you. To thank you, to tell you that what you did matters. That you matter. The paper was a check, more money than Maria had seen in her entire life. But Robert wasn't finished. I've also arranged for housing, a job at one of my companies if you want it, and I've been in touch with social services about your daughter. No promises, but I have lawyers, good ones, and they're looking into your case. He knelt beside her bed. Let me help you the way you helped my family, please. Maria couldn't speak. The tears came in waves for the years of suffering, for the miracle of this moment, for the child she'd saved and the child she'd lost. But mostly she cried because someone finally saw her, not as a homeless woman, not as invisible, but as a human being capable of extraordinary courage and worthy of extraordinary grace. Before we finish this beautiful story, if you've been moved by Maria's journey, please take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Pulse. Every story we share is a reminder that kindness can change everything. 6 months later, Maria stood in a small but comfortable apartment that was hers, truly hers. She had a job she loved, working with Robert's foundation that helped homeless individuals get back on their feet. Her daughter's case was still pending, but there were visits now, supervised but filled with hope and healing. And every Sunday, she had dinner with Robert's family, with the little boy who called her Angel Maria. Because here's the truth that Maria learned in that fire. You are never too broken to make a difference. Your circumstances don't define your capacity for courage. Maria had been invisible for so long that she'd almost believed she was nothing. But in saving one child, she discovered what we all need to remember, that every life has value. Every person has purpose, and every act of selfless love sends ripples through the universe in ways we can't imagine. You don't need wealth or status to be someone's miracle. You just need to be willing to see someone else's need as more important than your own comfort or safety. That's what heroes do. And that's what Maria Santos did on a cold November evening when the world wasn't watching, but heaven was.